Welcome to Crypto-Clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto-Clothesline.
Hello, Amy Rose.
Hello, Abheeti. How you going?
I'm pretty good. How are you going this week?
Pretty busy. Life has gotten a little bit out of control, and we know I love structure, so that's not the best thing for me, but I'm rolling with the punches.
Oh, hopefully not rolling with punches, but hopefully just rolling with a gin and tonic.
My partner, he went out last week and he was like, because I don't like getting flowers. I don't like watching them die. I don't like gifts really, but he got me this 6-pack of like organic red wine. Anyway, like by the end of the week, this has painted me incredibly poorly.
It was all gone. So that's 6 bottles in 1 week.
It wasn't just me. There was a lady who came over. However, 6 bottles in 1 week, regardless of if you had a friend over or not, it's still not ideal.
Did she pop in for 10 minutes or did she stay for the whole night?
She's a fellow Bitcoiner, and when 2 Bitcoiners or blockchainers get together, trust me, you can't not enjoy your evening together.
I was over at your house for like 3 weeks. I think, what do they say, that a guest is like a fish. After 3 days it goes off. You want them out of the house. Well, you had us there for 3 whole weeks. I'm pretty sure we did our due gratitude to the organic red wine industry in that time.
Absolutely we did. No regrets. I don't even have regrets about this past 6-bottle incident either.
Non, rien de rien. I'm sure we've said that in another podcast. Edith Piaf, I think that came up in Angela Wright's. That was her favorite saying. Je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything, or have no regrets.
Oh, that is beautiful. I think you're Angela Wright.
I don't think so. Rabbit hole. We're talking about cryptos. Everybody's going down their rabbit holes.
I hope, Katrina, you will share this episode regardless of how much talk about red wine we have, unfortunately. Sorry about that. This week, we're airing our interview with Katrina Donaghy. She is the organizer of Women in Blockchain Brisbane. She's huge. And she's also the co-founder and the co-CEO of Civic Ledger. She's also the organizer of the Women in Blockchain Brisbane meetups, and they have like 300 people who are members of this meetup. So it's not just women either. And some of the events you see some awesome, amazing men rock up and speak as well. So this group for Australia, I think, is the biggest Women in Blockchain meetup in the country.
I've been so impressed by the caliber of guests that they have invited to speak. They've just had amazing women who are helping to unfold amazing projects that are actually speaking at their events.
I know, and it feels like Oprah. So on the stage at the Women in Blockchain meetups, they do, like you say, have amazing guests, and they interview people on like a couch sort of situation. It's really warmly and homely. So yeah, I think Katrina's really, really good at that, at making other women and other people feel comfortable with her.
I think it's a really important aspect, because we've been in touch with Katrina too, because, thanks to your sort of nudging, like the little baby bird getting nudged out of the nest by the mother bird, I've developed and opened up and facilitating Women in Blockchain Perth. And a lot of the guidelines for how that should be run and how that should be sort of maintained and the languaging around it was provided by Katrina. So it's just been a fabulous support.
And I think Katrina helped Karen Cohen, who is the director and the manager of the Blockchain Centre in Melbourne, who's also launched the Victorian chapter of Women in Blockchain. So Katrina is helping you, she's helping other women create their own chapters of Women in Blockchain, which is essentially expanding the Women in Blockchain community like tenfold, because it would just domino effect, I think.
Well, there was an article that came out, I think it was a week or 10 days or so after we first interviewed Katrina, I'm going to find it and include it in the show notes. It was this incredible, beautiful article talking about influential women in blockchain, and Katrina was smack bang on the front. And it really showed the due recognition that she's getting within the community as being a woman who is making some serious moves and ensuring that this space is well populated by women and that it's not just a male space.
Before we listen to the episode with Katrina, because I know you're all desperate to hear the interview, it is in an airport, so full disclosure, she is a very popular woman. She's traveling all over the world all the time and speaking at events. And as far as women in Australia representing women in blockchain, she's heavily sought after. So it was very hard for us to actually pin her down with a time. So she was always jet setting. So in this episode, she is in an airport, and you'll get a good sense of perhaps what it's like to be in her shoes, because literally she was about to get on a plane.
That's true. And you can hear children playing. She must be in the departure lounge, and you can hear all of the announcements. So it's, it's a bit of a rolling with it, being a woman on the road. And it also, for me, indicates Katrina's flexibility. She's like, okay, I'm sitting in a departure lounge. I've got my laptop ready. Let's do this, girls. I love that it doesn't always have to be perfect. We just do what we can when we can.
And that brings us to our listeners' favourite moment, where we talk about why we're doing this. Welcome to Crypto Clothesline. Our show is about helping women join the blockchain wealth revolution for themselves and for their families.
Our names are Amy-Rose-Goodey and abheeti-kathryn-pass. We're speakers in blockchain and crypto, and we are on a mission.
We're learning together with you, talking with leading experts in the space, exploring cutting-edge technology projects that are shaping the future of our children.
This podcast is for intelligence, although you might question that if you hear some of our conversations, and growth. And our values are for peace, harmony, and collaboration on the planet. With that, we would very much like to welcome you to listen to the interview with Katrina Donaghy.
Today, we are very lucky to have the famous Katrina Donaghy here from Civic Ledger, and also one of the organisers of the Brisbane Women's in Blockchain meetups. Thank you so much for joining us, Katrina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome to Crypto Clothesline.
Thank you.
Katrina, at the moment, you're at an airport because you travel a lot. You go to gazillion events. I know you're probably going to get a little bit shy, but you win a lot of prizes for what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about Civic Ledger and why it's so great, and maybe perhaps a little bit about what you won recently?
Okay, it's funny because it's a startup. So we all work very, very hard when you're a startup. So Civic Ledger is an Australian blockchain company that focuses on civic applications of the technology. So we work very closely with government. We see the opportunity that blockchain has some really good user cases in government because they issue what we call assets. And when you have an asset that can be verified through an authoritative source, such as government, it makes it a different value proposition for the person that's doing the transacting or receiving the transaction. So we were founded in September 2016 after we did a small MVP with the Queensland government, which is a really long time ago because, as I've said this before, we're using the Bitcoin blockchain and using Colorcoin because Ethereum was still sort of getting out of its blocks. So because we got market validation that we had something that the government would find useful, that's when we created the company. And then for the next 16 months, we worked very hard to work with government to understand good user cases so we could better understand the potential of the technology. And during that stage, we worked very hard in, well, I particularly, and a whole lot of us, building out a community because we saw that there was a sort of a gap in trying to keep the noise out of the conversation. Obviously, the cryptocurrency, we felt that if we could educate, then we would get adoption and we'll realize the potential of the technology. So just recently, we were a finalist under 3 categories for the Finny Awards, and we were named Australia's Emerging FinTech Organisation of 2018. It's interesting. It's lovely to get recognised, but like all of us, we are working very, very hard to educate and get potential of this technology, which requires a lot of work. But it was lovely to be recognised not only by my industry and peers, but also from our community.
So you said that it was lovely to be recognised by your peers, but also by your community.
Yes. So we understand that the voting process was whereby our fellow blockchain startup who have a strong respect in the community, they were judges, and some of overseas people who we don't know also judged everyone's submissions. It was really nice.
Congratulations. It's huge. And a company in Australia. It's awesome.
And also, like, I do live in Queensland, you know, a little bit of Queensland in the conversation was really cool. So there was about 5 Queensland fintech, blockchain, crypto companies recognised as finalists. There was Travel by Bit, Living Room Satoshi, Edgesoft, InsurTech, and Civic Ledger. So it's showing that Queensland's also coming a long way, fintech. We're pretty good in Queensland.
I think Queensland and Western Australia are the 2 states that seem to be shining stars in the blockchain, crypto, disruptive technology space in Australia.
Yeah, obviously with you guys with Power Ledger, one of our beacons of innovation and conversation on a global scale. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. You mentioned MVP with the Queensland government. Can you explain to the listeners what MVP stands for?
MVP is a minimal viable product. When you build out software, it's really important to keep it very short, lean, and in very quick sprints. It's called agile because you want to test whether the technology is the right fit for the problem that you're solving. So you want to make sure it's reduced cost, and then the customer can see the results quicker. In the past, traditional legacy systems take nearly 3 to 5 years to get to market. By adopting Agile, you're quickly able to show and share client about the potential. And then once you deliver the MVP, then you might fill out and move into a proof of concept, which adds additional exceptions to the problem. And then once that's satisfied, then you may move into a pilot, which then takes the runway for software development through alpha and beta and enterprise.
Wow, that's very interesting. So it kind of gives us an inside view into what the inner workings are of getting a tech platform into a business model or into a corporation like a government.
As a methodology, everyone who develops software uses Agile. It gives you quick results and it's fast fail. So just because we have blockchain in what we do doesn't mean we're devoid of these normal approaches and things like that.
I've gone back in time a fair while, Katrina, because I just want everyone to see how a woman can get into the blockchain and cryptocurrency space from any background, really, because it's such a diverse mix of different industries. And I went back in time to when you were the vice president of a community kindergarten. And it's really interesting because abheeti comes from a background in teaching and community sort of thing. Can you tell us a bit about the timeline? Because in my opinion, you're very successful and everyone has different definitions for that. But you've been very successful. How did you get into the space? What sparked this for you?
I quit my job. I actually quit my job. I was an executive in a non-for-profit company and I got to the point where I had worked so hard for 20, 25 years, being very altruistic in my skill sets to actually make money for government, because I did a lot of revenue generation for councils and government. And I got to the point when my loyalty was not valued. So I just quit. And that takes a lot of courage.
Oh, it does.
Sometimes I think I waited too long, but again, it comes down to timing. But I'd gone through a health hackathon and I met some really incredible people. We looked at a problem very interestingly. It wasn't blockchain because blockchain still hadn't found me by that stage. But I took that innovation back to an organization that I was working for and they just kind of went, no, we don't do that sort of stuff here. We're not really interested. And there were some other conversations that made me question. So on the Friday, I had an interaction with my CEO and by the Monday I had gone. And then I joined the startup. We were looking at some things around identity. I found that I couldn't solve the problem through looking at it from a traditional way. And around September, October, blockchain found me and then I was gone. So, and then I remember going down the rabbit hole and realizing that this was a technology that could look at problems in a whole different way. And because I'm a sociologist and a problem solver, I found that there was a really neat fit to my values. And then went onto Twitter and started finding some really interesting people. And I found Leanne Kemp, who is also from Brisbane. And she created a company called Everledger. And I followed her and started stalking her on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I found out that she's speaking at the Innovation Summit in Brisbane in April 2016. And I tracked her down. I went to the Innovation Summit and she was the only person talking about blockchain technology. And I talked to her after she got off stage and I just talked to her about where there was a glut in Brisbane. We weren't really doing anything. And Leanne's a very straightforward person and she just looked at, I'm not going to swear, but she did swear at me. And she said, do something. Don't wait for someone to say it's okay, you go and do something. So I did. And I joined my first meetup, and that's the story. It's been crazy ever since. But I think it's just about setting yourself up to be open for an opportunity and being mindful of signs to say you've got to be paying attention to something, and this is the reasons why. But it's not easy. This stuff is hard. I mean, Jesus, we're dealing with a technology that nobody understands, and we're trying to work with government. You know, nobody would think that you would put the two concepts together, particularly when it comes from such a libertarian perspective. But we sort of see the opportunity around emerging democracies, developing countries. It's just incredible. And I'm very, very grateful for this journey that I finally find with the right community who are very passionate about this technology.
Can you tell us, Katrina, what kind of work you are doing with the government? What sort of projects? You mentioned emerging democracies and developing countries. Anything more specific you can share?
In Australia, we work with government around the idea of issuance. So if you think about you as a citizen or a taxpayer or a customer or ratepayer, for you to interact with government, or if you want something, you have to fill out a form and they assess your suitability, and then they'll issue you a permit or license, whatever. These are what we call assets of value, whereby we as citizens need to interact with government to get a service. That sort of stuff is what we call time sensitive. So if you want to park a car, for example, and you get a fine, that because there's a time difference between you saying, I'm going to park for this amount of time, and then a ticket inspector comes along and says, no, you've overstayed, and then you will dispute that and say, no, I was there for this time. All that data sits in siloed databases that are manually handled, and that's why we have to go to court quite a lot for attestation. So anything that is a time-sensitive relationship, this is where blockchain can create an opportunity to reduce friction, create a better user experience, improve transparency, but also speed up the delivery of those services. At the same time, it reduces costs and it reduces waste out of the actual transaction. So in Australia, there's 811 million transactions every year between federal government and state government with citizens and customers and organisations and enterprise. So if you think about all those transactions, that's huge and a lot of red tape. So we sort of find opportunities to look at transactions. So we've looked at water. Water is a massive market in the agricultural sector. It's worth $16 billion. But those transactions often don't happen in a transparent way. And if you look at water, it's a very precious commodity. But if you understand the true value of that water, then we would probably have a different relationship with that asset, particularly around returning it to the environment, sustainability, better public policy. And we found that that experience was really quite interesting for us. And that led us moving on into, with IP Australia, looking at rights, patents and things like that. So anything that is a paper-based transaction, that is a good user case, potentially has a blockchain application. That's about everyday life, every day.
For example, if I'm getting a bill from the water board and it says to me, you've used X units of water, and I want to contest that because I don't think it's true. Is that what you mean by transparent?
Yeah, that's right. It's just something whereby the data, I'm going to just introduce a few new words and I'll try and make sure I define them correctly. But blockchain technology relies on verified data because you just can't say that blockchain is going to solve the problem of data or truth. A lot of people think that blockchain will create truth, but it won't. It'll there to store the relationship in that transaction. It's a neutral place for a transaction to happen that is verifiable, transparent. So if we've got clean data, and the data is what we call federated, that means that it's gone through a process, everyone agrees, you get consensus, and then it goes onto a registry, then that data becomes the source for transactions to occur outside of government. Now, just bear with me because this is where some of the exciting stuff is happening. When we talk about open marketplaces and sharing economy and stuff like that, everyone's really interested in the government providing services but also getting out of the way. And so is government. But they're dealing with traditional legacy systems that make that a bit hard. So we're working with government agencies that are interested in the question saying, well, if we create registries that are secured by the blockchain so we can say that this is the truth, this is accurate data, then how does that open up to new marketplaces? So we hear about open data by government all the time, but that data is very difficult to understand. It's unstructured. We don't know where it's come from. It's not verifiable. So if we start to say, yes, this is the right data, this is the right transaction, this person has that asset and that person wants to take it into a marketplace, and the marketplace actually trusts that data, and therefore you can create these new economies or these emerging economic propositions. That to us is very exciting. I'm going to dip over to the concept of ICOs. There's reasons why I'm taking you over this journey. But when we think about initial coin offerings, we're starting to see a less interest in ICOs because of the problems that we've seen, and more now to security tokens. And that means that you have an asset-backed token. So when you think about government, everything that they transact with is an asset. It's backed by the government. So therefore, it's valuable. But what governments don't do, because they issue it to you in paper, it's not liquid. But if we digitalize that relationship or digitalize that asset or that transaction, it becomes liquid. And if the rules permit, then they can go into marketplaces for exchanging or transfer or for consumption. So I guess what I'm saying is that tokenization, securitization, asset-backed tokens is going to be a very interesting conversation over the next 12 months. So I'm hoping that the word blockchain will start going into the background, and we don't have to talk about what it is anymore, how it works, but rather we're going to start talking about good use cases and how it is creating efficiencies and reducing costs and creating trust.
Katrina, could you just give us a practical example? When you mentioned the digitalization or everything becomes liquid, what does that actually mean if you're talking to somebody on the street?
Okay, well, if you receive something in paper, it's a physical thing. So you can photocopy it, you can pass it to someone else, and nobody will know who has it. So when government issue a piece of paper to you, they've lost that relationship with that piece of paper. They have to trust that it's going to be used for the right reasons, such as, say, commercial fishing. But what happens is some bad actors will get involved in that transaction and overfish. But because it's a paper transaction, it's very difficult to have oversight. So then your government employ a lot of people to do compliance and regulation to check that everyone's doing the right thing. But in those pieces of paper, it's like a contract. It says, you are this person, you have the right to fish here, and you're able to take this amount of fish out of this space on these dates. These are the rules to which you're able to have this right. What we do is we take those elements or those rules and we turn them into smart contracts. And the rules then become digital, baked into a token, which represents that piece of paper. And the only way that token can move through its processes is when the rules have met their conditions. It's very interesting because every time there's a token moves through its supply chain, you're able to verify who has what. Are they fishing in the right area? Are they taking the right amount of fish? Because if they actually start not complying with the rules, the value can't be unlocked out of the token. And I'm probably going off in a completely different rabbit hole right now. But I guess I'm just trying to bring it back to something very simplistic. But I think most of your viewers would have heard of Ethereum and smart contracts and tokens and things like that. So Ethereum is the blockchain, and the smart contracts, what we call the ERC20 standard, which allow coders to code rules into how things can work. It's what we call a social contract. So if we digitalize assets that are issued by government, then we're able to see where they go. And if the rules said, if you've got residual value in a permit, and the rules say that you can actually put that into a marketplace, then you can actually put it into a marketplace for it to be discovered, and then you can actually trade it, exchange it, sell it. And government can see those transactions happening. So it starts to change the way we start to interact with each other, or we start to organise each other in a society or the economic proposition.
It sounds like there's going to be, because in my opinion, when I picture the future, there's not going to be paper cash, there's not going to be paper, and everything will be digitalized. But I'm just wondering, though, why it would be so difficult to sell that idea to the government, because if they've got 800 million transactions...
It's 811 million, yeah.
811 million I'm just like, I'm listening to you, and I know how much time and money that can save.
Yes.
And they know that everything has to be digitalized.
Yes.
It sounds like the perfect relationship. Why aren't they jumping on it and saying, Civic Ledger, come and save us?
It's complex. It requires a lot of education. You've got to realise too is that the technology has been around, you know, when Satoshi Nakamoto issued the paper 2008, October the 31st, 2008, and the first Bitcoin was actually transferred in January 2009. to Hal Finney. We still don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, but it's fine, we don't really care. But it's all been about the cryptocurrency, and that puts a lot of fear into leaders who are responsible for taxpayers' money, and as well as the politicians. So this is about education. So that's why we do a lot of education, but it also takes leaders within departments or government to stand up and say, hey, let's go do some exploration and discovery around this technology to realize the potential and see if there are good user cases out there. And then let's build out a strategic roadmap to see how we can build out the potential of this technology. You've got to remember this technology is still very nascent, and there's a lot of people around the world building on and improving and stuff like that and solving some interesting problems that are still making the technology limited. But the opportunity is that not everyone's engaged, but what we're seeing is that the world is now starting to wake up. So last year when we were at APAC Blockchain Conference, there was 120 people there, largely industry talking to itself. This year we had about 460, where we started seeing people from outside blockchain technology coming in and wanting to understand the potential. But it's been pragmatic, I guess. It's saying, this is the potential, but how do you start? And that's where we come into play. We show them how do you start thinking about it. But it's also tied up around regulatory systems, because the technology is only about 25% of the solution. Once the tech is easy, it's all those other elements around regulation, know your customer, anti-money laundering, identity, all that sort of stuff. The barrier to is that no leader in government wants to tell politicians that they're likely to lose jobs. And this technology will start to remove jobs out of the equation, but will add new jobs as we start to understand the potential of this technology. That's a problem, especially when you've got government who are there about keeping jobs, but we know that this technology is going to create an awful lot of automation and there will be a lot of job changes. So governments have to understand the fourth industrial revolution, future of work. They've got to understand their workforces are going to be. They've got to understand what type of skill sets that they're going to need for the future to actually make sure that this technology does realise its full potential. And don't forget, the world only has about 25,000 developers in this technology. So that's a big problem too. We don't have the devs.
We've actually got a shortage of a lot of different professions, particularly in trades, which I'm going off track. But, this year or next year, there's not actually going to be enough supply of our basic requirements of infrastructure, trades, builders. They're going to be charging a fortune because they can.
And that's why blockchain devs can charge up to $250,000 a year, because finally the world has realized that they are valuable. So the call to action on this is to say, if we're going to realize this potential, then we've got to look back and start educating. How do we actually put this technology into schools so kids can start to understand solidity programming? We know that we've connected with a school in Melbourne called Melbourne Girls Grammar, whereby the STEM teacher is actually teaching grade 10, 11 and 12's girls how to code a solidity and write smart contracts.
Whoa, that's so exciting.
I know.
Let's talk about that. And then let's talk about your meetups that you hold for women, because we are actually all about women on this podcast and encouraging women in the space. Can you tell us about that programming for women?
Yeah, so what happened was last year there was a hackathon in Melbourne just around smart cities. So some young women from Melbourne's Girls Grammar decided, through the encouragement of their STEM teacher, to participate. And they went along and they solved some really interesting problems and they enjoyed the experience. And so I found them on Twitter commenting about what they had done. And I was an advisor to the APAC Blockchain Conference in terms of how to build out the content and who to get speaking and everything. I just, did a retweet and everything. And then I approached them. I said, look, I'm involved with APAC Blockchain. Would you be interested in having the young women come and speak at the APAC Blockchain Conference about their experience and why they think blockchain technology is important to them? And they thought it was fantastic. APAC Blockchain group that put it all together. We thought it was awesome. So then they actually spoke at APAC on the first day. They keynoted. They keynoted after Robert Kahn, who is the father of the internet.
These are young girls.
Oh, yeah, they got up and spoke. It was awesome because they basically said to a room full of, people, there's about 40 people, and they basically said, pay attention to me because I'm not going to own assets like you want me to own assets. If I want to listen to music, I can tune into Spotify. If I want to get somewhere, I can order an Uber. These are really important things because it's putting the banking industry on notice that their current loan products that they're developing at the moment are going to have no relevance to the emerging generation who see blockchain as an opportunity to truly create a peer-to-peer economy whereby they can share assets because they are digitalized. So if you think about property, in the future, you'll be able to see property titles digitalized where they can have multiple owners, shareholders in a title. At the moment you can, but it's expensive. Or as if you wanted to change your relationship with assets by having these digital experiences. So they basically stood up and told the entire room how important blockchain is to them and what they're going to be using it for. It was fantastic. It was amazing. We did some interviews with them on YouTube, Coinstar. So you can do some research and you can find out exactly how that all worked. But the notice is to say you can create a pipeline of developers, but it has to start in school. But unfortunately, we're still trying to get coding into schools. This is a private school environment. Because you've got that strong leadership, they're able to bring it in. But this is about getting into public schools. Start talking about blockchain technology, emerging technology, what it means to have peer-to-peer economies, what digitalization is going to look at, because this technology is going to need ethics. It's going to need storytellers. It's going to need UIs, UX, people who are able really great at actually making the technology disappear. To me, that's an inspiring story, and I tell it a lot because I'm such great admiration of these young women. And it was really cool because one of them actually was very skeptical. So she was much more interested in the ethics side of things rather than actually the programming, which is really...
I think that's a really important point, Katrina, because we do see that a lot of private schools, and I went to both as a kid, I went to a private school and a public school. I am able to reflect now that I'm a parent that my kids are getting a lot less exposure through their small community school than, say, I got when I was going to the ladies' college that I went to. And gosh knows why they called it a ladies' college. But anyway, it's all about marketing, I guess. And it is interesting. I would love to see public education embrace this with the same sort of social intelligence that a lot of private schools do when they offer things in the curriculum to their students.
Yeah, but it's hard. Look, it's not hard. It's just having an awareness that this technology exists and an awareness of the potential of this technology to transform societies and economies. There are conversations in universities, but it is around the postgraduate area. So we're starting to see RMIT in Melbourne are leading the way. We've got University of Queensland, we've got QUT, Griffith University. So the universities are starting to have a conversation. How do we actually bring it down into the school environment? I don't know how that's going to work.
Well, that might be where we come in, because I don't know if you're aware of it. We started off obviously very small, a thing called Crypto and Kids, where we're teaching kids about cryptocurrencies, but more than anything about blockchain technology applications and physically how it works. And we're looking to take that into public schools as part of our sort of ideation.
Yep, it's absolutely important because it's also educating the teachers, it's giving them the skill sets, the knowledge. In Australia, we're doing some amazing stuff, but we still don't have a strategic roadmap for the adoption of blockchain technology across sectors. Okay, we're all really interested in it now, but we still need to really be very strategic. China, on one hand, is extremely strategic. They have blockchain technology in their strategic government direction, where the president speaks about blockchain technology, so hence why China is so far ahead than the rest of the world. You still have a lot of challenges around the regulatory framework. In for example, in other countries, they will consider cryptocurrencies as illegal, ICOs as illegal. So we're trying to work out the noise and what's real. So for the curriculum to come into schools, we've got to clean this stuff up a lot. We've got to say, what is the definition of blockchain? What is the standard? What is the protocol? So it's very hard because, and also this technology is moving so fast. You know, when we talk about when we came into this, it was blockchain, Bitcoin and Colorcoin. Now we have Ethereum, but we also have EOS, we have IOTA, we have NEM, NEO, Ripple. Ripple, you've got so many different blockchains, so many different coins, altcoins, tokens. So it gets a bit confusing for the person who doesn't understand this technology and looking in. So we've got a bit of responsibility to start cleaning up our messages.
What a mess.
Oh, it's a chaotic mess, and the reason why is because people are really committed. You know, the community are very committed to actually bringing this technology to its full potential. So it's very, very different when you think about the internet came about in 1993. You know, that came from some very different motivations, whereas the blockchain technology evolved out of the GFC. So it's very different. This is an open source technology that nobody owns. Nobody can own it. That is also a big problem for government because they really want to go, where's the data? And you go, well, it's spread around 22,000 computers around the world. And I go, why is that so? How do we deal with that? So you've got to really change your mindset about understanding data, open source, community. And obviously the question around the energy gets asked a lot too because it's proof of work, it's a consensus.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and the reason why I do this is probably the segue to why I do the Brisbane Women in Blockchain meetups. It's because we have a really great community in Brisbane. We've got the original Brisbane Bitcoin blockchain meetup run by Lucas Cullen, and he started that in 2013 because, nobody was talking about it. So he started a meetup. He's now got 1,800 members in his meetup. We're off to a meetup tonight. We've got the Ethereum Brisbane meetup, which started about 17 months ago by Tom Miller, discussing Ethereum. I remember going to those meetups and there'll be about 10 people there, because it was so early. We do the Brisbane Women in Blockchain, we do crypto, but everyone's doing their fair share to do this stuff for free so we can educate. So my focus is to interview women in the technology. So I've interviewed Dr. Lucy Cameron from Data61, Dr. Jane Thomason from Act Associates, Emma Weston from AgriDigital, Shireen Yip from Travel by Bit. And all these women are doing the heavy lifting. And because they are looking at the applications of the technology, how do we actually use the technology? It's a much more interesting conversation because I get about 80 to 90 people at every meetup, and I do get a lot of men as well. But they work in industry, and if I can show them why we need to know about it and how it can work, then they can go back into their workplaces and say, hey, I'm hearing about this technology. I think it's something that we should start exploring and start to understand. And then what happens is that it actually creates a marketplace for startups to actually have their product validated through commercial contracts, not by grants, not by sitting around for a year and hoping that somebody's going to be interested in their stuff. Because if we get people on the tools, then we actually build out more devs. And more devs, the better we're going to be off. But we have to get industry to actually start exploring this technology and then go into the community and saying, help me with it, and we'll pay you for it. And that's why I do what I do. And I was inspired when I went to New York last year because I went to a Women in Blockchain meetup, and I found it amazing that the conversations were far more around the ethics and the reasons, why should I care? Why do we need to know about this? How's it going to change my life? I'm going to be skeptical, so convince me. So it was much more intelligent conversation because I go to a lot of meetups up to that point and it was all about what was under the hood. And I love that, but I'm not a coder. I'm much more about, show me how it works. Show me what I can do with it. Show me what problems it can solve. So then I can actually start to understand the business models that need to be rethought to actually take this technology on board, because you can't look at problems. If you look at a problem such as refugees and identity, you can't come at it from the same paradigm. You've got to change your whole mindset. And that is a massive challenge because everyone looks at the problem and goes, well, we can't solve it because you're looking at it from the wrong way. So this technology gives you some interesting tools. It makes you think really hard about data, because if you're going to put any data onto that blockchain, you've got to be really sure that that is the right data going onto that blockchain.
Yes, exactly.
You've got to have, good conversations around privacy and security and data ownership and keys and wallets and cybersecurity and elements of regulation and legislation and jurisdiction and sovereignty. And there's a whole lot of stuff that comes with this technology, and it's great.
Fascinating.
Wow. So these meetups that you have, these women in blockchain, compared to the meetups in New York where you say there's a lot of focus on ethics, is that also something that you focus on at the Brisbane Women's Blockchain meetups?
Well, I guess what I was referring to is that there was women in the audience who come from various disciplines. So you had lawyers, public servants, business owners. And so because of their job title or what they do in their own lives, they were trying to understand how the blockchain technology would be applicable into their own discipline. So if you're a lawyer, why should I care? If I work in the government, why should I care? Which is great because you've got to ask those questions, because you have to be skeptical around this technology. As Lucas talks about as 7 reasons why not to use a blockchain. Just because somebody says use a blockchain and all of a sudden you'll go do an ICO and raise $100 million is not the right reason to do it. It's just not the right reason. You've got to really understand what is the purpose of blockchain. And it doesn't make any sense just by itself. It's a layer of infrastructure that creates an ability to verify a transaction that's underpinned by cryptography, whereby you have common parties interested in that transaction. and they don't trust each other. So they need to have a neutral place for that transaction to occur. And that is really interesting when you start to think about how do industries such as a utility sector that may be in competition with each other, how do they start to now cooperate?
Wow. It's actually, you've blown my mind. So, but in the long run, I mean, there's so much to be done in the space, particularly around education and the lack of developers. But let's say in a couple of years, and I'm being very positive about that we have the developers and, you know, everything in place to launch blockchain officially in the government everywhere. Everyone loves it. How do you see the world with blockchain? What do you think is the best outcome, and where do you see blockchain technology in the world overall? As in, what will the world look like when everyone who needs to is adopting blockchain technology?
I would like to think that we will look at value completely different. I think we will have far more participation in economic markets than we see today. I think because we will understand values such as commodities, such as water, carbon, food, provenance, that it starts to change the way we have a relationship with each other. There is also a downside, you know, this could go all pear-shaped. Nobody knows. I sort of keep reminding myself as going back to 1993 when the internet sort of started to form its, you know, come out and what's happened because of the internet. So when we think about the internet as a layer and a protocol, obviously the protocols such as HTTPS and ICTP, ICP/IP, and all those protocols, we still use those today. And we build stuff on the internet, and we don't want to know what the internet is. We're not going to sit down and say, please explain to me how the internet works, or please explain to me how email works. I guess I just hope that in the future, what you'll see to remind yourself that blockchain technology is around is that when you actually use a DApp on your, who knows if you're going to have mobile phones, but the DApp will say powered by blockchain or secured by blockchain. And then we'll just know that what we're actually buying is authenticated, that the person we're transacting with, we don't need to know them, but we trust the transaction. That we'll see new business models evolve where we got more efficiencies. It's sort of funny because you can almost see the Black Mirror thing, like, you know, the idea that we start to put bad data on blockchains just to change people's reputations. So we'll just have to see how the world reacts when it starts to go quite mainstream, because you will have bad actors, you will have bad and good everywhere you go. But I sort of see a world where my children and my plane, I have to start going soon because we're starting to board, but I see that my children will work in a global workplace. So the idea of them having frictionless experiences moving between countries because they own their identity and they're able to verify themselves without having to go through third parties. I like to see that this will enable problems to be solved in a disciplinary way because of the ability for us to move seamlessly through borders and things like that, because we have trusted transactions. I hope to see that we'll have water markets that are democratized and inclusive. So we take greater care of our commodities such as water, air, food, soil, barrier reefs and things like that, because we actually can understand the value proposition, because we can have that transparency.
I absolutely love that. When I think about the future, I think about the same thing. And I also think about the money that can be saved for governments to put into the good. You know, they're taking money out of health, education, and they're all saying we can't afford to do this. But if they just saved money on the administration, we would have a lot more. And so I see just the savings in money alone having a massive impact.
So we see that the immediate impact of blockchain technology in public sector and most of the sector markets is going to be just reducing cost. So we'll find efficiencies because the transactions start removing, you know, waste out of the relationships. And I am down to the last person to get on this plane. So
thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a good flight.
Thank you. It's great to be able to have these conversations, and always happy to do a follow-up if there's more questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, you get on that plane. Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina.
All right. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So how amazing was that? The most inspiring thing about that interview was where she mentioned how she left her comfy position because her loyalty in that business wasn't valued. So she was like, you know what? I'm worth more than this. I'm leaving you guys. I'm going out on my own and I'm going to do it on my own. See you later. How courageous is that?
And I love the fact that she was heavily influenced by another woman who basically just turned around and said, just do it.
One of the quotes that she mentioned in this episode that really stuck with me was when Leanne Kemp, who's also Australian, also awesome, and swore at Katrina, apparently, although in the episode Katrina didn't swear. That's awesome. Thank you, Katrina, for not swearing in this episode. But she basically said, if you're going to do something, just do it, and don't care if it's okay by everyone else. You know, if you want to do it, just do it. And that's actually a mantra that I go on. If you're passionate about it, just do it. Get it done.
I think that's a very powerful message for women in particular, because I know men are also conditioned to be worried about what other people think of them. But I think as women, with the constant influx of information from billboards and magazines and that whole body image thing, like, women are so concerned about approval from the outside about how we look, what we say, how we dress, what our ideas are. Did I go okay on that? And women in the crypto blockchain space, it's generally very well received. But we've also had some pretty nasty experiences in both men and women's groups, haven't we, in the online arena, which was one of the reasons we were so sparked into creating the crypto-clothesline as a women-friendly space. I love that fact that Leanne Kemp and Katrina took up that discussion and Katrina ran with it.
Yeah, Leanne Kemp is someone who I'm going to put a shout out to right now. Leanne Kemp, we want you on this show. She's amazing. She's the founder and CEO of Everledger. And so I'm taking this opportunity to call Leanne onto our show as well.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to meeting Leanne. I'm excited about watching Katrina's developments and to collaborate with her as we unfold in our various crypto and blockchain projects as well. We've got a listener question. And it's an absolute doozy, and I don't know if we can answer it, but shall we try? Because the whole idea, everybody, with this little segment is we're not trying to be perfect. That's rather timely. We're not trying to get it all right, and we're certainly not trying to be intellectual academic know-alls. But what we are open to doing is exploring ideas that perhaps we don't fully understand, in order to also share with you that you don't have to be an expert in the space to be able to discuss things. And we would love people to give us feedback on the answers that we give, perhaps correct us, give us a bit more information. We're all about interaction and community, and what better way than to screw up and have you tell us what the real deal is.
Totally agree. I think after that, now we are going to have a whole bunch of people say, guys, I think you should do this. I think you should do this. Maybe you should think that. So watch out for the influx.
All right. So full disclosure, Amy Rose hasn't seen this question before, and I saw it all of 3.5 minutes ago. So let me pop it in the chat. We have a question from Kelly Slattery at the Self-Love Sisters.
Yes. Do you think there is such a thing as too many coins in the crypto space?
I'm sorry, but that reminds me of a famous saying that you say about too many on the dance floor.
Yes.
Are you going to say it out loud?
Nope.
Oh, God, you've said it before.
Not in Katrina's episode.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. Too many coins in the crypto space. Well, I think the simple answer to that is absolutely yes. Tick. Shall we move on? No.
I don't think so. Only because we're on the planet Earth and there's various countries with all their different currencies that are working. You do have to transfer them and convert them. But I feel like there's going to be a currency for little communities in third world countries who are using their own currency to trade between 30 or 40 people. And then there's going to be a currency for, this is getting out there, but there actually might be a currency for people who are living on Mars for 5 to 10 years when humans go up there and probably don't come back. But I feel like there is a need to have a currency that is made for a group of people that it's suited for. And who are we to say there's a limit on that?
I think that's a really good point. I guess my response was coming more from the point of view that there are so many developments and so many businesses being created around this sort of crowdfunding. You know, here's an idea, throw us some money, here's the ICO, boom, now we're off to have lunch and thanks for coming. So that whole issue of what people are calling, you know, shit coins and coins that have no value and projects that are completely false or that they have absolutely no intention of developing. So they're taking people's money and then disappearing into the ether, excuse the pun. And so I think it's a, I think it's a really good aspect. What you were talking about, it reminded me of Sophia Mutt's peace coin. So she wanted to create a coin that could be used within a given community for acts of kindness. All of that, I love those ideas. But if you look at the 1,500 coins that are listed, are we really going to be using all of them, or are they all going to have a genuine use case in our various cultures? I don't think so.
I definitely don't think so. I think that we have too many shit coins. Absolutely. We're in the beginning. These coins will disappear. Technology will get better. People, communities, groups, clubs, schools, projects will all be allocated whatever currency they want to use. Who knows? But at the moment, you're right. There's too many shit coins, and we just need to wait for technology to evolve.
From our perspective, I guess to summarize, we could say, yes, we think there are too many coins at the moment, and a lot of those will be culled and they'll just disappear because they're not full of integrity necessarily. However, a lot of coins that will remain might not be of use to every single person on the planet. It's not going to be a big sort of centralized versus decentralized kind of situation.
And also, there's around 6,000 cryptocurrencies at the moment, and we're only aware of 1,500 that are listed, on exchanges, which is really unfair. And we are subject to what the media shows us, whatever information we're fed in the crypto space on all these big, the 1,500 cryptocurrencies. But there are others that exist, like the UN has a cryptocurrency for a project in a third world country. So we don't hear about that. That's not listed on CoinMarketCap.
Kelly, I hope that we have managed to give some perspective on your question. Thank you for sending it in. And we welcome other listeners to reach out to us through the various platforms that we have. We've got a Facebook group, we've got a Telegram group. All of that information is in the show notes so that you can get in touch with us. Can you send us your questions? Just give us your name and send us a question, and we will do our very best to address it in an episode. And when your question does come up, we'll make sure that we tag you so that you can listen in.
Thanks, Abheeti. I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, you've called Abheeti.
And Amy Rose.
At Crypto.
Clothesline.
Leave a message after the
Beep. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Ready?
One of the ladies on your show talked about exchanging solar power. Now, I could be wrong. It has happened on occasion. But let me try to figure this one out, because honestly, the more palaver you girls come up with, the more confused and outraged I feel. How do you exchange solar power between you and your next door neighbour? Last I checked, I couldn't put my solar power in a bucket and go over and pass it over the fence to the neighbour. Now, you're talking about transferring it digitally. Last time I checked, I couldn't push my solar power down the electricity line or even down the internet line. I couldn't even shove it into my screen. So, ladies, once again, get your facts straight.
Crypto-clothesline. Crypto-clothesline.